remember that we've been talking about carbon and how it's been affecting the environment. And yesterday, after our lab, we had started talking about ocean acidification, right? And we'd put up a number about how much carbon dioxide we actually produce as the United States. And we started to think, okay, if all of that carbon dioxide was dissolved into the ocean, how much acid would we actually be making? And that's where we sort of left off. So I want to review this before we get started on the next activity. So we had our problem, and we were wondering how much acid would we produce if all of the carbon that we produced from our factories and cars and all that, was dissolved into the ocean. So going back to this ocean acidification. So we do the problem the same way as we've done all of our conversions, where we start with our given and we place that over 1, and we wrote down what it was we were solving for, which was the grams of acid. We also had the equation that was already balanced so that we could complete this conversion. So if you remember, if I have grams up top here, then I want grams down here. And we were able to work through our conversion cards to solve this problem. So in our first place, right, we use the grams, we put the mole on top. Remember, in this one, our solve and our given are different substances. So we know that means we need to use the mole ratio card. So once we got to moles of CO2, then we had to use our mole ratio card. Where did these numbers come from again? Balanced equation, right? So we looked at the balanced equation. We have 1 CO2, and we have 1 in front of the carbonic acid, right? So now as we look, we have our units canceling out. Now if we want to get to grams, we can use our first conversion factor that we learned, right? And we'll be able to cancel out the moles of the acid and leave us to the grams, okay? Where did I get these grams? Periodic table, right? So each hydrogen is 1 gram for a mole, carbon is 12, and oxygen was 16. But remember that we had 2 hydrogens and 3 oxygens giving us that total of 62. So what this means ultimately is that if all the carbon dioxide that we put into the atmosphere went into the ocean, we would be producing almost 3 billion grams of acid in the ocean. That sounds a little scary, right? Definitely not good for our fishies or our shelled organisms, right? Probably not good for us either if we went in the ocean, okay? So now that we've been spending all this time thinking about the carbon dioxide, thinking about how it's affecting our environment, we're going to sort of lead into looking at what President Obama thinks we should be doing about our carbon sort of going forward. So we're still focusing on understanding how carbon is affecting our environment, as we were looking at also previously. And we're going to look at this speech, though, specifically to see what sort of evidence is in it. Okay? How can we present a claim or an argument, and how can we support that? And as you're used to when we're doing close reads, we're going to spend some time working together to discuss the text and make sure we have the understanding. We're going to read President Obama's climate change speech. So I'm going to start passing these out. I want to remind you that we already did a close read, right, of a Scientific American article. You remember that one? Where we learned about the effects that carbon was having. It talked about the ocean acidification, climate change, all of those things. So this is going to be our move into what is the solution? What can we do to start making things better? So we're going to look at the remarks that President Obama made in June of 2013 at Georgetown University about climate change. So what does he think we should be doing with carbon pollution, okay? Let's first remind ourselves what it is we do when we annotate and why we are. So when I think about annotation, I think it really helps me process the text, right? If I try to just read, even when I'm on my iPad and I can't highlight anything or I can't do anything, I'm like, I'm not going to remember any of this, right? So it's important for us to make sure we're doing our annotations so that we can process the text, but also so that when we go back to the text, we can remember what we learned, right? We're going to be coming back to this text next week when you all are working on a project where you're going to focus on the solutions for carbon. So the more you write, the more you highlight, the better and easier it will be for you to complete that project next week. Here's what we're going to do for our first read. Again, you're going to do your first read as an individual, and I want you to focus on what are the 3 parts of Obama's plan. So what is it that he thinks we should be doing? And sort of how does he think that's going to be carried out? What does that translate to sort of in the future? Okay? So as you go through, you've got your highlighters, you've got your pens. Make sure we're annotating, writing ourselves notes in the margins. So I'll give you your time now to read as an individual. what I would like for you all to do now is discuss what it was that you determined were the parts and how it's going to be carried out. If there are any words that you were confused about, please talk with your group about them, and then if we can't come to sort of an answer or definition in your group, then we can talk about it as a whole class, okay? So let's take a couple minutes and discuss with your group what you think were the plan, the 3 parts of the plan, and how it's going to be carried out, okay?
Other people were going to be mad and stuff, but he said that this will create more jobs for others so they don't lose their jobs.
Right. Was there any words you guys were confused about? Yeah,
Bipartition.
yeah.
Bipartition.
Or that one?
Oh, bipartisan.
Bipartisan.
Isn't it like for both parties? Like it's
Yeah.
not Republican or Democrat?
Like it's for both. Like is that something that everyone's agree on?
How about over here? Did we get to find the 3 parts of the plan?
We found
Found the second and the third.
Okay, what'd you find?
the second one is to use more clean energy.
Okay,
And the third one is to waste less energy.
okay.
Carbon pollution.
All right, so we're going to waste less energy, we're going to use more clean energy. So there is a third part. And no one was able to see that third part?
I didn't.
Okay, so what is he trying to tell us in the front of the article?
The carbon emission is bad.
Okay, so he's presenting his case for why carbon is bad. Okay, is he doing anything else about talking about action or something we should be doing?
He says he's directing the Environmental Protection Agency.
Okay, so he's talking about a specific agency doing something. Okay, so there is a sort of running theme through this front. And he sort of addresses in the beginning what his plan is. Could anyone see that in the sort of the beginning of the article where he tells us specifically what he thinks our plan should be?
Begins with cutting carbon pollution by changing the way we use energy.
Okay, so what follows that?
Using less dirty energy, using more cleaning energy, we're wasting less energy throughout the economy.
So we're looking at lines, what, 7?
Yeah, 7 and 8.
Okay, so we're seeing maybe here's where he's presented the plan, but maybe for us it's not so clear where he's actually shown us how we're going to do that first one, right? So maybe we'll see with some more reads what it is he means by that.
Yeah.
Okay. So I had a little bit of time to check in with a couple tables, and I think it seemed like we kind of had bits and parts, maybe not all 3 parts of the plan, maybe 2 or 1, but I'd like us to share what we think the 3 parts of the plan are. Would someone help us with that? Sam?
The first one was pretty much using less dirty energy.
Okay.
Using more clean. It's in.
Yeah, can you tell me which line?
But it's like year 5. It's like it says this plan. Yeah.
Okay, so this plan begins. Okay, and so you're saying 1.
Yeah, it's pretty much using less dirty energy.
Okay.
Using more clean energy. And wasting.
This was also something that Maya said too, right? You were saying that he presented the jobs and you liked that, right? Why did you think that was a good thing for him to include?
Well, he's kind of like combining the idea of like what the American people want with the economy to what people need in the environment. So if he's saying like this is going to get us more jobs, it's kind of like, oh, well, it's a bit of incentive, like, oh, I want to do this. And it's a good idea even if I don't really care about the environment, like good jobs are needed everywhere.
So he's kind of appealing to different people's different needs, right? Maybe they don't care about the environment, but maybe they want a job, right? Okay. Another interesting thing that I heard was Wally brought up empathy. Can you share with the class what you meant about that?
Oh, like he said for the sake of our children, and then I thought he was using like children, and like what Matt said was, I don't know, like he was trying to relate, because he also used gas prices and he used jobs, so like he's just trying to relate to the average American. So
He's pretty much trying to like fix all the problems that we have with like gas prices and stuff. He's just trying to kill like 5
Okay, so we're seeing he's appealing to us in many ways, and we keep going back to this killing now 5 birds with one stone instead of 2, right? But yeah, I understand what you're saying. Okay, so that kind of leads into the next thing that I wanted us to think about before we do another read. Who is the audience for this speech, and how do you know? So like where in the speech does it tell you? So I want you to take a couple minutes and discuss with your group, and then we'll discuss as a class. Were we able to identify who we think the audience is? Yeah, what do you think, Heidi? Americans. Why do we think that?
Because he says, for the sake of our children and the health and safety of all Americans.
Okay, so
He doesn't refer to other like countries.
Oh,
Americans.
okay. So he's almost addressing us. Is that what you feel like? Okay.
He says America a lot too. Yeah.
It's repetitive, right?
When he says,
so he's like, he brings up the children a lot, so it kind of makes you think that he's like trying to appeal to like the older generations that might have kids that they like obviously want to protect their children. So he's like, well, like think about like your children, like you don't want them breathing in like harmful chemicals like every day and stuff.
So do you think it's as broad as Americans, or you think it's a certain subset of Americans?
Well, I think it's like Americans, but then also like he like hits on like the parents.
I got a chance to walk around to talk to a couple of different tables, but I'm wondering sort of what our thoughts are, if we've come to a consensus as a table of who we think the audience is. Would anyone like to share with us?
I think he's talking to the future voters and like the other side because he's bashing them in the subtext. Like he's not really saying it, but he's saying it in the way they would like understand. Like he's saying that they did something, but they wouldn't. He said none of it really happened except we cut acid rain dramatically. And like he's saying our children's futures and stuff, like when we're like 18 and stuff, when we're ready to vote.
Okay, so you're seeing in the text that he's sort of giving you those examples and appealing to you as a person, right? And thinking, okay, in the future, if I am going to vote, what am I going to do? Yeah, Sage.
He's kind of talking about, he's almost through his subtext, he's talking to kind of the future voters, but kind of promoting like Democrats and how the Democrat Party has this plan, but how the Republicans, like, he's almost kind of putting them down in a way, saying like they don't have a plan, and he's kind of like promoting his side of the government and what he wants, and that they're better and they have a plan. So he's definitely trying to appeal to like our generation who's going to be voting in the next few years.
Where in the text do you think he's sort of promoting his agenda, like, or the Democratic agenda? What do you think shows you that?
A few parts where he talks about it, but one part that stood out to me and was when he was talking that certain part, like the House of Representatives, like there was that one person who did not like vote for the Clean Air Act, so it's kind of like, and he really, it seemed like he tried to like put emphasis on that and the fact that like who was that one person type thing.
Vanessa, what were you going to say?
oh, well, how Sage is saying that it's kind of talking to only one party. Right in the beginning, it states by a partisan, which means both parties, so he's not just directing to one. He's kind of talking to everyone.
Okay, so in the text we have hints about being bipartisan, and so you're thinking he's appealing to both sides. Okay, Heidi, what were you going to say?
I agree with Sage and Vanessa. Like, what I think that Obama's trying to do is to, like, low-key, like, trying to, like, say Democrats are better. But I think he put that word there so people think that he's, like, involved, like, engaging to everyone. So I think he's trying to, like...
The word bipartisan, you mean? I've heard a couple people bring up the Clean Air Act and the acid rain. Remember that we read about that in this class and that we saw sort of the effects of it. Did anyone else have any other ideas about who they thought the audience was?
I feel like this, like his whole speech was more to get people to like back him up on his plans, like the plans that he has, because when he mentions like all this good stuff, like you'll pay for less gas and then less tax and all this stuff, it's sort of like appealing to everyone so that they feel like his plan is like foolproof almost. So then like if this plan does get executed and it doesn't like turn out the way he wanted, I feel like it's just gonna let people down, because I don't think there's a way that he could promise like all this stuff to everyone.
He's just promising what he can't do.
Okay, and so it's kind of going back to what Sam was talking about originally, but we're seeing that he's kind of trying to fix all the problems, right, and do all these positive things, and then we kind of think in this brain space, right, well, is it really possible? Here's what I want you to focus on for the second read. someone's going to read out loud. You can again split it up into different paragraphs if you would like. But I want you to focus on what makes this speech credible, or what evidence does the president present. You've been using this word credible in English, right? So I want you to think about what that means. Why should we believe the president? What evidence or examples does he give us so that we want to believe what he's saying or believe his plan? Let's select someone to read at your table and start reading, and while you're listening, make sure you're annotating for these ideas about credibility.
They plan to cut carbon pollution. They plan to protect our country from the effects of climate change. And they plan to lead the world in a coordinated assault in the changing environment.
Using less dirty energy, using more clean energy, wasting less energy throughout our economy. 43 years ago, Congress passed a law called the Clean Air Act.
And that law passed the Senate unanimously. Think about that. It passed the Senate unanimously. It passed the House of Representatives 375-1. I don't know who the one guy was. I haven't looked that up.
Did we get through our second reading, y'all? Okay, so I want to make sure we're going through and we're highlighting or underlining, right, what the examples or the evidence, whatever it is that makes you believe the president's credible, and make sure we're writing our notes on the side, okay? Because next week we're going to come back to this, and I don't want you to forget any of this greatness that's going on right now. Let's start with the first question then, though. Are there examples that he presents to help make him build his credibility?
It worked before, it can work again.
What is the it that you mean, you think?
Like Clean Air Act, like passing a law or whatever, like has been done and it's worked.
Okay.
So we can do it again.
Okay.
It should work.
Okay, it should work. Yeah. Wally, what were you going to add to that?
Oh, like basically, they're doubting it. He's like, they doubted it then, and they doubted it in 1990.
Okay, so this doomsayer stuff, is that what you're, okay. And then 1990, are you talking about here?
Yeah.
Okay.
They doubted it then, they said, I told him, why death, and none of that happened except we cut it out, we cut acid rain dramatically.
Okay, so why is that important for his credibility?
Because he's basically like saying that we've done this over and over and it's never gone wrong, so we can do it again. You know, like you said.
Okay, so it's worked in the past, so it should work in the future. Alicia, what were you going to say? So that connection to the past and what he's done in the office now is sort of helping us believe maybe that it can happen, right? We're not saying we know for sure, and definitely probably want to do some more research, but in this excerpt that we have, there are some examples or evidence that sort of are helping us see that his claim or his plan, his argument could be true, right? So the reason that we're focusing, did you want to add something? Okay. That I wanted to focus on this sort of evidence with the claim is that next week we are going to be writing letters to congresspeople or to the president about what we think is the best next step when it comes to carbon dioxide. So do you think it's going to be effective for you to just write, I think, blah, blah, blah? No, what do we need to have? Evidence, examples, right? So I wanted you to see that the president is even using this technique, right? Presenting an argument and then supporting it with some examples or evidence so that you can sort of try to see this as a model for you to help understand how to write your letters next week.